Welcome to Grace Christian Family Center in Tomball, Texas. This is God in My Journey, and tonight's story is Ashley Jensen.
Good evening. When I decided to share my journey, I honestly wasn't sure where to start, and I thought this will take way too long. And y'all know I like to talk. So I decided I would focus just on one part of my journey, and that part is the story of my husband and myself growing our family, and that's what I'm going to focus on tonight. I will say that I do feel like the running theme of my life with God seems to be a constant reminder that He knows me deeply. He created me, He knit me together in my mother's womb, and knowing me deeply, even with all my flaws, He cares about me. And I have had the privilege in my journey to see His care in the seemingly smallest of details. I will just start real quickly. One of my favorite, kind of like it's my life passages is Psalm 139. And I'm going to skip around a little bit for the sake of time, but this is kind of what I feel fits the theme of my journey. Psalm 139, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it." And then I'm just going to skip a little bit to verse 13. "For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them." I will say that I should start by saying that when I was a teenager, I felt like I wanted to adopt. And really don't know where that came from. It wasn't like I had been around many families that had fostered or adopted. I hadn't volunteered for any organizations that were involved in that, but yet there was just this feeling in my heart. And I remember telling some of my friends I wanted to adopt, and I actually remember, telling my mom that I wasn't even sure I wanted to get married, but I was sure that I wanted to adopt, and I just was like, I want to adopt kids from like all over the world and just have this house with like all these kids, just a place where they could live and have a mom that loved them and they could have home and family. And my mom's response was, "I'm going to pray for you." And I'm pretty sure she and my dad have said many prayers over me. And I'm pretty sure one of those prayers was that the Lord would send a man to help me on this journey. And He did. And so her prayers were answered. I met a man. My husband and I met, and, unlike me, when he was a teenager, he did not have dreams of adoption. He wasn't opposed to it, but it wasn't something that was just embedded in his heart. But I told him that's how I felt. I knew that's something I wanted to do one day. He was like, okay, great. And we didn't discuss it much or in great detail, but it was just always this thing that was there. We got married, and as things go, one day, finally, we decided we would start trying to have a family. Interestingly enough, we actually started pursuing adoption first. For this bit of time, I really felt this call to adopt from Haiti. I really don't know where that came from, and I would say I probably haven't been pulled that way since, but God works all things out, I guess. But so we actually started with an organization outside of Austin who had part of their program was an adoption adopting through Haiti. So we started with them, and then as things go, that program got shut down. Governments in other countries sometimes make it really difficult. And so that program got shut down, and when it got shut down, my husband and I were kind of like, what now, right? What do we do now? So we decided, well, we'll just try to get pregnant and see what happens. There were many negative tests and discouraging days. And it took almost a year for us to get the joyous news that I was pregnant. We were elated. We were so excited, and we started planning for a baby. And I got a call one day from my OBGYN, and she said, I don't know how, but I have missed something on your medical intake forms. And I'd been with her for a while. So it was interesting that she missed this thing, and she said, I'm so sorry. But she said, I have to send you to a maternity specialist. So I have a heart condition, and so she was like, you've got to go see a specialist because of this heart condition. I didn't think much of it, but I thought, okay, we'll just go and see what she has to say. I went to the specialist, and I remember sitting in the room waiting on her to come in, and this doctor came in, and she, I guess I would say, probably lacked a certain compassionate bedside manner. She was very direct and very to the point, and she said to me very bluntly, she said, I tell most women with your condition not to get pregnant. And if they are pregnant, I advise that they have an abortion. So imagine a pregnant woman sitting in that office, and this is what you are being told. It shocked me. I honestly felt stunned, and I couldn't believe what she was saying, and I was so confused. And by the grace of God, I managed to remain very calm and collected and non-emotional in her office. And I just responded, and I said, I am already pregnant, and I am not going to have an abortion. So now what? And she said, well, now I get to send you downtown, and you have to go see a cardiologist down there, another specialist. And I had a cardiologist, but she wanted to send me to this other one downtown, and she said, I need him to check you out because we need to make sure you can have a normal delivery. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, you may need to deliver downtown in the Women's Center with a team of doctors around you in case your heart stops in delivery and they have to try to revive you. And again, it was like, what is this information coming my way? So I said, okay. I took the card to make the appointment, walked out of her office, calm and collected, picked up my phone to call my husband who was at work, and poor guy on the other end, he heard a hysterical pregnant wife. I can only imagine what he was imagining was happening because I could barely get the words out. I was just sobbing, and I'm like, I was processing what this doctor had said, and of course my husband was not happy with the way this woman handled it, but it's okay. So he and I made the appointment. We go downtown, and I will never forget on the way downtown, we were kind of reminiscing about what this specialist had said. And I remember saying with my husband, you know, the thing is, no matter how blunt she was, she has completely prepared me for the worst. I am fully prepared for the worst. And there is nothing this cardiologist can tell us today that she has not already told us is possible. So we obviously had a lot of prayer, and we went to this cardiologist, and we spent 3 hours downtown. They were amazing. I will say they did all the tests there. They didn't make us leave and come back. They went over everything there with us. They were an amazing team. They drew pictures and diagrams. We were like, this is awesome. But I will never forget, the cardiologist said, you know, your condition, it's there. I see it. And he said, but I like to look at the whole heart. And he said, the rest of your heart is really good. And he said, I fully believe you can have a normal delivery with your doctor, and everything will be okay. And when we left, I will never forget just the feeling of relief. Like, what a relief to have had so much just joy and then fear and worry and heartbreak and sorrow, and then, okay, relief again. And I look back on that now and I think this is kind of that part of God just knowing me so well and being in all the details. I realize now, if my OBGYN had seen that heart condition before I got pregnant, she would have sent me to a specialist before I got pregnant. And the specialist would have had the same words to me: don't get pregnant. And my husband and I would have never tried to get pregnant. God knew that I would hear that and say, okay, this is why I felt the call to adopt, because I can't have a baby. I'm not going to have a baby. And so this is why I felt this, and the Lord knew I would never try. And if I had never walked down the road of pregnancy, I would have missed out on the most amazing miracle that is our oldest son, who I am so grateful for. And there we go. Okay, sorry. It went blank on me. Y'all would have loved for me to have to wing this. It would have been extra long. My notes are keeping me in check. But it was one of those situations where I think that's just God showing himself. The details, knowing me, knowing what I would have done. And so he just worked all that out. And so we had our oldest, and he was wonderful, and he's a great kid, and we loved him so much. But then the day came where we were like, okay, it's time to grow our family some more. We wanted him to have a sibling, and we decided we would try, but that was proving difficult once again. To get pregnant, again, was proving difficult, and we prayed, and we felt like we should pursue adoption. And if you've ever gone down the road of choosing adoption, then you know very much that it is a overwhelming task just to choose an agency. There are plenty of agencies, and we felt overwhelmed, and so we just kind of picked one, a popular one. It's a great organization. We knew people that had gone through them, and so we just thought, well, we'll pick them first. And so we went to an informational meeting, and on the way, my husband and I prayed, Lord, just let us be on the same page. Let us just know if this is the right one, the right place. Let us just know. And we want to just know that clearly that this is where you want us. We went to an informational meeting. We walked out. We got in the car, started driving off. My husband looked at me and he said, well, and I looked at him, and at the same time, we were like, nope. And it was like, what? Like, neither, okay, like, we're on the same page, yay, like, yay. But then we also were like, but now what? Like, there's nothing wrong with this organization, so why did we not feel like this was the right one? What do we do? And so one of the good uses of social media, this is one of the few good reasons, I guess, we put it out there and we said, hey, does anybody have any recommendations, any advice? And so one of my friends private messaged me, and she said, hey, I have a friend. And she said, my friend works for an adoption agency. Here's her number, call her. So I called her, left her a message, and I thought, well, we'll see. Maybe she'll call me back, maybe she won't. I didn't really have any expectations. And that very day, she called me back, and we spent an hour on the phone. And I hung on every word she said. And in my heart, in this conversation, I knew this is it. This is the one. This is what we're supposed to do. And I loved everything she said about the organization. I loved their mission. I loved their heart. And I said, this is it. Got off the phone with her. And I said to my husband, I found our organization. He's like, what? He didn't get to go to a meeting. He didn't get to be part of it. I was like, no, this is the one. And so I told him everything she said, and he was like, okay, well, that all sounds great. But here's the kicker. They are not an organization through CPS. So I will briefly just explain what that means. There are organizations that are through CPS. And what that means is when CPS removes a child from a home, they have to find a home for them. But you have to they go through organizations that are licensed with them. And if you are someone who is in with a CPS organization, you get a stipend to have a child in your home, which means you receive financial help for food, diapers, formula, whatever you may need. Also, if that moves to an adoption, you get help with the adoption, and you pay a very minimal fee, like $2,500. It's very minimal. Then there are organizations that are just strictly mothers who are pregnant. It's straight adoption. There's no fostering. Mom picks you. Those are very expensive. There's those organizations. And then there's our organization that we went through. And they're kind of this one that's right in the middle. They do fostering and adoptions, but they are not through CPS. Now, CPS will sometimes use them, but you do not get a stipend because of the way it's set up. And not only that, but if it moves to an adoption, you are paying a full price for an adoption. And I will just tell you, a standard full price adoption is $15,000. Okay? So, knowing this about this organization, we felt like it was the right place, but my husband and I had some obvious reservations and concerns, and we were scared. But it wasn't enough to override the feeling that we had that we were where we were supposed to be. We started all the paperwork, got it going with that agency. If you know anything about this, you will understand when I say it was a second job for me. It is invasive into your life. It requires a ton of paperwork and training, and every detail inspected, and I started that process. And I will say, even feeling it was the right agency, we did have reservations. One of my biggest reservations was that I hadn't considered fostering. I knew I wanted to adopt, but I wasn't sure about fostering. And I was concerned because I was hung up on the fact that there is no guarantee if you foster. You bring a child into your home, you love on that child, and then you have to give that child back. I should say the goal of fostering is reunification with the birth parent, because ultimately that is what is best for the child if the parent can get things together and raise that child right. That is the goal. So you know that when you foster, but yet you still get attached, and that child gets attached to you. And I was struggling. I was hung up on this guarantee. There's no guarantee. How will I say goodbye? What will I do? How will that child understand? And I was really hung up on there being no guarantee. My husband was concerned more about the financial end of things. He was very hung up on that. And then also, I think just that feeling of like, what would the bond be like? How would that work? Will it be the same? And so there were these reservations. In all of that, a twist was thrown into it. In the middle of all of this, I ended up pregnant. We were elated, a bit confused, but excited. So I backed off the paperwork and the starting really of getting things going, and we started planning for pregnancy. I felt like I barely had the news that I was pregnant before something went wrong. And I was at work one day and knew something was wrong. Doctor told me, get in bed, stay in bed. Things got worse. And I ended up in the ER with a miscarriage. My husband had like a bet tonight if I would cry or not cry and how many times. And he was like, I could see you not crying or crying like throughout the whole thing. So we'll see how it goes. I'm on cry number one. But I ended up in the ER with a miscarriage. And we went from joy to sorrow in a matter of weeks. And I was heartbroken. And to be honest, I was confused. I was confused by God. What do you want? I cried a lot. But I remember talking to God a lot. And in one of those moments, I remember saying to God, I don't understand what you want. I just remember being like, what do you want? Like we started foster adoption, then I got pregnant, now I'm miscarried. What do you want? And I remember hearing that still small voice, and I wouldn't say audibly hearing, but feeling God speak to my heart. And I remember the exact words were, "There are no guarantees." Now, I am not saying that God let me get pregnant and have a miscarriage, like, just on purpose, some kind of, whatever. But I am saying that God knew my hesitation in fostering to adopt. I was hung up on the guarantee. And God spoke to my heart in that miscarriage. And he said, there are no guarantees with anything in life. Biological, clearly I had miscarried. Foster, they may go back. And even in adoption, we had friends that have gone to the hospital to pick up a baby, and mom changed her mind and kept the baby. There are no guarantees. You just have to follow where God leads and trust. And your heart might get broken, but he will mend it. And around this same time, as only God does the things he does, my husband, who is a teacher and a coach, had a student in his class one day say, "Hey, can I call my dad? I need to call my dad and tell him something about practice or whatever." And then the student just randomly tells my husband, "I just love my dad. My mom and dad adopted me, and I love them so much, and I am so glad they adopted me, and I am so glad they are my parents." And my husband's like, "Why is this kid telling me this?" Except that for my husband, it was affirmation, right? It was like, okay, God, there's my affirmation. I still wasn't sure what to do. I remember exactly where I was driving in my car, and I said to God, "I don't know what to do." And I said, "I don't want to try to get pregnant again. I don't want to foster or adopt. I don't want to do anything because I don't know what to do." And I said to God, if you want me to do something, you have to make it clear. If we should move forward with adopting, then the agency can contact me. Blunt, very blunt to the Lord, very brave, very bold. So God loves us and our faults. But I just was at that point, and I had stopped communicating with the agency, right? So that very day, I got home, and later I checked my email, and there in my inbox was an email from the woman I had spoken to on the phone at the agency, and there was an email from her just checking in on me. "Haven't heard from you in a while. You guys still want to do this? How are you doing?" And I was like, okay, God. All right. You have made it clear. And so we moved forward. It is worth noting, I feel like I need to also note, our son randomly one night, before we had discussed adoption really with him or any of this, we didn't want to really kind of tell him yet what was happening or whatever. And our son randomly one night, we're saying his bedtime prayers, and he prayed, "God, please let my mom and dad adopt a brother or sister for me." And it stopped me in my tracks. I was like, "What did he say?" I was like, I probably heard that wrong. Because I was like, why would he even pray that? And that child prayed that exact prayer every single night for a year. And boy, did God answer his prayer. And one more way of God being like, how many more signs do you need from me, right? I was like, okay, all right, God. So we moved forward with our paperwork and got it going, and we were at my sister's house celebrating, I think, her birthday. And I got a call from the agency, and I was like, this is interesting. I'm going to answer the phone, and they're like, "Listen, can you hurry and get your licensing finished?" We were still in the process. They said, "We have a little boy, and he's going to need a home. Foster, temporary, but he's going to need a place to go." We were like, oh my goodness, yes. We did not have a name. We did not have a description. Little boy. That's what we were told. So we got all the paperwork done and got everything done, got it turned in so that we could take in this boy. I'm going to backtrack for a second to a dream. It's fitting that this call happened at my sister's house. And the reason this is fitting is because before we had kids, before we even had our oldest son, my sister had a dream. And one day she was like, y'all, I had a dream about y'all and you're a kid last night. We were like, what? And she said, I dreamed we were all on vacation. And she said, we're on vacation. And she said, we're all getting out of our cars. And she said, you get out of your car. And she said, you guys said, hold on, we got to go get Isaac. And she said, you guys went to your car door and you opened your door. And she said, y'all pulled out this little curly, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy. And my husband and I laughed. And we were like, oh, yes. My husband and I have dark hair and dark eyes. We were like, yes, we will probably have a curly, blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boy. So we laughed about it. So keep that in mind. Get the call at her house. Fast forward to our final training. At the training, there was a family that had taken him in already. They I'm not sure that's the right use of the word, but this family had had him when he was a baby. He had been removed from the home as a baby, and this family fostered him. And so they took him in again until our license could get finished. They were in the middle of their own adoption, and so that was kind of chaotic, but they took him in again. And so at our final training, the foster mom was there, and she said, oh my goodness, you're the family that's taking, and she said the boy's name. And we had a name, and not just any name, but his name sounded like and was spelled identical to our oldest son's name, except the first letters were different. And we were like, okay, all right, God in the details, right? God knowing us. And not only that, but she goes, oh, let me show you pictures of him. And so she pulls up her phone and she pulls up pictures. And there in the pictures was a curly, blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boy. And I was like, oh my. And I think from the training, I'm texting my sister the pictures, and I was like, look at this child. This is the boy. This is who we're getting. Remembering that she had this dream, right? Remember that dream. We had a curly, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, and we laughed. We would never have a child with that description. And there in the picture was confirmation of a dream from years before. Reassurance in a way that only God can give you. How much more reassurance did we need to know that he was supposed to be in our home for however long that would be? He did come to live with us. And we did visitations with his biological mom every couple of weeks. We had been told he would most likely go back. I remember after he would fall asleep at night, we had hard nights with him at first, tearfully praying to the Lord to help me to know how to say goodbye. I didn't know how I would do it, and much less he started calling me Mama. I wasn't sure how I would explain to him that he couldn't stay. And in the middle of all of that, you guys, we got another call from the agency. There was a young woman who was pregnant and intended to give the baby up for adoption. She had seen our bio story, and she was interested in meeting us. Would we meet her? Absolutely, we said. Once again, no information about this mom. We drove to the agency with absolutely, literally nothing, no information, a mom. We had some thoughts because this agency worked with, had a kind of a street ministry, and we kind of thought maybe this was just one of these girls that just knew she couldn't have the baby and raise the baby. And so we get to the agency, and one of the women that runs the agency said, hey, I need to talk with y'all for a minute. We were like, okay. And she said, I need to talk to you about a connection with the birth mom. So, remember the woman that I had the phone conversation with from the agency? The reason I picked the agency? Well, the pregnant woman was her daughter. And they said, we just want to make sure you're okay that this woman would be the biological grandmother, and this is her daughter. And my husband and I were like, we're okay with it. Is she okay with it? Like, us, like, is this okay? Now, I should tell you, they are a wonderful family. And the biological grandmother and her husband, their family, they did offer. They wanted to raise him. So they are a wonderful family. And his biological mother is a wonderful mother. But she had a young daughter, and she was a single mom, and she just knew she couldn't do it. And she felt that this was what God was telling her to do. She had had her own story of signs of different things and God pushing her towards adoption. So it's interesting because not only was this woman the first one I talked to on the phone, she's also the woman who God used to email me to get me back on track, right, with the agency. God in all the crazy, crazy details. And we would have her birth grandson. We were surprised and nervous, but in my heart, I knew it was just one more way that God was in the smallest of details. We got very close to his birth mom, and we had the privilege of getting to go to some appointments, or I had the privilege of getting to go to some appointments, sorry, husband, with the birth mom. And I got to see ultrasounds of him, and one of the appointments we went to was kind of his birth mom was having some issues, and so they were trying to decide if the baby should come early because she was just having some health issues. There were a few concerns, and I should tell you that the mom and I were very close. We communicated a lot, but there was always, I think, a fear in the back of my mind that she would change her mind because she's a really good mom and her family is really wonderful. And I just thought, this doesn't make sense. So in the back of my mind, I think I always thought, she's going to change her mind. She's going to change her mind. I even told her that I would understand. I repeatedly, I told her I would understand if you change your mind. I will love you no matter what decision you make. The fear was for our broken hearts, but we knew the baby would be loved with her or with us. Our worry was not for him. It was for our own hearts. So as they're making this decision about when the baby should come, as there was a due date, the doctor says, I think we need to take him a couple of weeks early. And as I'm sitting there listening to them decide when that would be, I was stunned when I heard my mom's birthday come out of their mouth. He would be born on my mom's birthday. Once again, I felt like God just being like, I am here. And all the worry, and then all the fear, and all the anxiety, I'm here in this story. Once again, God, in the details, trying to reassure me. We were so honored that his birth mom let us be at the hospital for his birth. We were allowed into private moments and given the chance to bond with him while she was still recovering. We were all in for a surprise when our little guy was born with a cleft lip. In an interesting twist, no ultrasound ever showed it because he never showed his face. He never saw the full front of his face, so no one was prepared that he would have a cleft lip. So I'll never forget his birth grandmother, who was from the agency. They came out to tell us that he had been born and they wanted to take us back to be with him and the mom. And she said, I should just tell you that he has a cleft lip. And we were like, okay. Honestly, it was kind of like we didn't even know really what that meant or what to expect. Well, once again, God in the details, his birth mom had an aunt, the sister of the birth grandma, that worked for Operation Smile. Operation Smile is an organization that helps repair cleft lips around the world for those that need it and need safe surgery and can't have it, don't have access to it, can't afford it. An aunt that works for an organization that fixes, repairs cleft lips. That aunt got on the phone, she lives out of state, got on the phone and got us connected immediately with a doctor out of state on the phone in the hospital. And that doctor got us connected with an amazing team here in Houston. She knew who to call, and it put all of our minds at ease in the hospital. One less thing we didn't have to worry about. Doctors assuring us, we've got this, we do this all the time. We got connected with an amazing team. Once again, God in the details. A child born with a cleft lip who would have a birth aunt or great aunt who would work for an organization that happens to be in the cleft lip repair business. We were given the honor of adopting both of those boys. But once again, we were with an organization we chose where there was no financial help for adoptions. So we found out, we knew we were getting to adopt the baby. The other child was kind of up in the air. And then we found out that his was moving to an adoption. And so we found out that their adoptions were going to take place 3 weeks apart. And we were like, okay. So we're with an organization where we don't have financial help for the adoption. And we were already praying and trying to figure out how do we come up with the youngest son's adoption fee, which would be close to $15,000. We felt helpless. We kind of were like, we were praying a lot and we were just trying to figure out, I think, what could we do? Were there grants? We were just in this trying to figure out what can we do. I remember when we started with the agency, one of the caseworkers said to us, because of this, knowing what this is financially, she said, you just have to step out on faith. We have never seen God fail a family. And I thought, okay, God. She said, we've seen him do miraculous things. So we're like, Lord, we need a miracle. And we did not have that kind of money. The whole process is really one big stepping out on faith. I think people thought we were crazy. We both work to make ends meet. And, didn't really have that kind of financial cushion. But we trusted God. And we felt like we had followed exactly where he led. So when it came time to prepping for the youngest adoption, we were hopeful and prayerful. Out of the blue one day, one of my dearest friends calls, and she said that God had impressed on her and her husband to tithe in the way of our youngest son's entire adoption fee. They had come into some money, and they needed to tithe it. And the tithing would cover his entire adoption. I honestly could not believe it. It was just one more way that God showed up. And that's a big detail. I wasn't saying the smallest of details, but I'm like, that was a really big detail. That's a lot of detail there financially. But it's just one more way that God just showed himself in the details of our story. So we have one taken care of. So now we have 3 weeks later, we know we're facing another adoption. I wasn't going to say his name. That's okay. His adoption was going to cost more money. It was actually going to cost about $10,000 more, and that was because of extra attorney fees. His adoption was a little more complicated, and so it was going to be $10,000 more than the other one. And we also had to drive to a different city for his adoption. We were overwhelmed. We were happy, scared, unsure. We had very little we could contribute. And once again, a dear friend called and said she was going to start a GoFundMe for us. We thought, okay, we'll at least get a third of it covered, right? Like we'll get a substantial amount. I think we were like, what can we sell? You know, what can we come up with? What can we sell to come up with the rest of it? But much to our surprise, the generosity of friends and family all across the map gave so much that the entire fee was covered. Once again, we were in shock. And once again, God was in the details, showing us if we just trust him, he will work it out. And we adopted our youngest on, here's another tiny detail, his adoption took place on National Adoption Day. So that's another tiny detail. The other one took place 3 weeks later, and we got to finish out that year. They took place towards the end of the year, and we got to finish out that year with 2 adoptions and 3 sons. And our youngest son, I should say this, I was not planning to say my kid's name, so I'm not going to say his, but when we were trying to decide what to name our youngest, the birth mom was so kind, and she said, I want to put the exact name that y'all want to name him on the birth certificate. And so we were trying to decide because our 2 older boys, our oldest biological son and then our son that we were fostering to adopt, had very similar names. And we thought, well, we can't have a third son who's like some random other name. So we were like, we've got to have these somehow, his name's got to go along with theirs. And so we were trying to think, all of our boys have names that have meaning. Our oldest, his middle name is after our husband. Our middle child, obviously his first name we kept, and it had meaning because of the connection with our oldest son, but we gave him, his middle name is after the dream that my sister had. And then there was our youngest son. What do we do for him? And we came across a name that is very similar to the other 2 boys, and that name means that Jehovah has heard. And we thought, when we saw it, we said, that's it. And ironically, my husband and I had this discussion on a Saturday night, and we came across the name, and it said Jehovah has heard, and we were like, that is the one, because God heard our prayers. And we come to church the next day, and my sister said, oh my goodness, I found a name for y'all. And it was the same name. And I said, no, we already found that name. You don't get credit. No, but it was the same name. And I was like, oh my goodness, that is the exact name that we found. And so we gave him that first name. And then his birth mom had the words, Jehovah has heard, tattooed on her arm as a constant reminder that God heard her prayers, and he also heard our prayers. And then we gave him my dad's name as his middle name. Born on my mom's birthday, named after my dad, God has heard. I will say this too about our middle son who came through foster adoption. The child that I miscarried, by our calculations, would have been born in February of the next year. After women miscarry, a lot of times they have another baby, and they call that your rainbow baby. But I didn't get pregnant. But in God's beautiful design and details and knowing us, I touched my microphone, sorry. And knowing us, our middle son's birthday is in February. And he's the one that came after the miscarriage. And so I always think that he was our rainbow child, the one that took the place of the one that we miscarried. And sorry, I have to do this because I'm really bad at letting my screen die here. Okay, sorry. And he took the place of the one that we miscarried. And it's just one more way that in this journey of us growing our family, I have seen God in the smallest of details. There is a verse in Deuteronomy, and I'm just going to quickly go to it, but and it says this, and I don't want to misquote it, so I'm just going to read it. Deuteronomy 31 says, "It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you." It is the Lord who goes before you. And I can truly say, in this journey of my husband and I growing our family, in the smallest of details that only matter to me and to him, I have seen God in every detail, and I have seen that he does go before us, that he really does go before us. I mean, the way everything has lined up and the way everything worked out is just an example of God going before us. I think back on that part of our journey, on the hard days. There are hard days. There are hard days, as a mom in general, and there are hard days with kids who come from trauma, and there are hard days. And there are days when I feel like I am failing as a mom. And there are days that I believe the lies that we tell ourselves, that I am not good enough, that they deserve someone better. And then I look back and I see that God worked out all the details so perfectly. From dreams that we laughed at to fearful moments of worry, to heartbreaking loss, to uncertainty, to newborn baby cries, to exact birth dates, to miraculous help. He has been in every detail. He has gone before us. He knows us deeply, and he prepared things just as they needed to be. I always think that God knows us so well. And I do think that God does stretch us sometimes out of our comfort zone, and we were definitely stretched out of ours. But even being stretched out of our comfort zone, God still cares about us as individuals. And I have felt the tender care of God in making things happen in a way that he knows me and he knows this is what she needs. I mean, I even laugh. I didn't share this, but I even laughed because when I was pregnant, I think there was still some worry in the back of my mind, like, oh, this one doctor said this one thing. And this is just another way of God knowing me so well. Everyone said, your water won't break. That's in the movies. You're going to be late. It's your first baby. You're going to be late. You're going to have contractions on and off. They're going to send you home. Your water won't break. Okay. 2 weeks ahead of my due date, in the wee hours of the morning, I think my water is broken. I think things have happened. And I did what any rational human being does at 4:30 in the morning when they think their water is broken. I called and woke my sister up. And I said, I think my water broke. And I described to her at 4:30 in the morning in detail, not my husband, but to my sister. And she was like, you need to call your doctor. Yes, you probably need to go in. We called the doctor, and we're like, oh my goodness. We jump up, and I am imagining contractions are about to start. I'm about to go into labor, and there's this fear in the back of my mind, and I'm at the hospital. And I think I was making circles around our closet, and my husband was like, what are you doing? Because I had not packed, because, see, people had told me this wasn't going to happen. And I'm circling my closet, and he's like, are you all right? And I was like, no. He's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm scared. And he was like, I know. And so we prayed, and we got in the car, and we got to the hospital, and nothing happened. and nothing happened. And I always joke, I have no idea what a real contraction feels like because I never felt one. They had to induce me because my water did break and nothing happened. And even in that, I always laugh because it was like God knew, do not let this woman have contractions on and off. She cannot handle it. She will not be okay. You have got to make this thing happen in a way that forces her to get to the hospital. Even God knew this woman cannot handle this. You're going to have to just make this happen in a way, and he did. And I look back and I'm like, everything went well and everything went smooth. But even in that, I think God knows us so well, and he has a lot of grace. He does not expect perfection from us. He expects trust. He expects us to follow where he leads. And then he works out the details, and he works with our humanity and our flaws, and he shows us in the details. He cares about us deeply. What God in my journey has shown me is that he knows me better than I know myself, that he cares enough to be in the smallest of details, and that he can be trusted. Thank you guys so much for letting me share tonight.